To the untrained eye, it appears the wheat crops around Merriwa are healthy and almost ready for harvest, but as always, looks can be deceiving. A lack of soil moisture has left the wheat susceptible to diseases such as crown rot, meaning between 50 and 75% of crops may not produce grain. When seeds were sown in May, better than average rainfall was predicted for spring.
A lot of people gambled on taking advantage of that and put in some extra crop.
But the rain never came.
We had 310 mils of rain here in June. We thought all the drought was finished, but we only had 42 mils since then, and we've gone nearly 10 weeks now without rain at all.
The flow-on effect for the area could be disastrous. Less money made on the land means less money spent in town.
It really did have the potential as being a lifesaver for the district, because the prices being as good as what they are, and a month ago the yields were potentially very, very good.
Clouds in the sky today gave hope, but even if predicted rain falls, it will be too little too late. Wheat quality would improve, but the quantity would stay the same. Farmer Dennis Nutt says the more hardy barley and canola crops have survived, which will provide some relief for growers. Even in the face of more hardship, it seems the man on the land still has a sense of humour.
Oh, we would never hope for a bumper crop because that never happens.
Mitchell Hughes, NBN News.
There was a big police response at the Beresfield Bowling Club today, but according to officers, the only crime being committed is an under-resourced police force. More than 100 police from the Cessnock, Maitland and Raymond Terrace stations voted to begin industrial action in 28 days' time if the shortage isn't addressed.
When you look at the amount of members in there and how passionate they are, they've had enough. They've had an absolute gutful. They want some assistance. They need it now, and they need it in the medium term, and they need a full restructure of this command to make it work.
The Lower Hunter Command is under strength by as many as 70 officers, with 55 currently off duty and 30 not expected to ever return.
They're angry, at the bottom line. They're angry because at the end of the day their health's being affected by the workloads.
Instead of doing one job to finality at a time, which they're supposed to do, they'll take on 5, 6, 7 or 8. There was a truck crew there the other night that I believe had 52 jobs outstanding at some point during a shift. That's one truck crew.
The Police Commissioner has reportedly ordered a review of the entire Lower Hunter Command. Superintendent Des Organ told NBN News today that he'd continue to support and assist his officers wherever possible, but they say he won't agree with them on what's needed to fix the problem.
Basically, we can't agree on the amount of cars that we need out on the road and how that can be resourced.
Paul Lobb, NBN News.
They've got to go through the process of the administration before they come to council, but I am aware that there are some knockdown proposals. There are also some refurbishment proposals, so council will need to work through those fairly thoroughly to get a result.
T.C. Frith's grandson painted the final message to customers on the window of the Toronto hardware store today as the years of family history ran through his mind.
We've been trading on this site since 1923, 84 years, but the firm itself has been trading for 110 years. And as a third generation member, it's my rather sad task to actually have to turn the lights out as of today.
When the store opened, it sold groceries, electrical goods, furniture and clothes, as well as hardware. But today, after a week-long closing down sale, only a few odds and ends remained, along with plenty of emotion.
Very sad indeed.
Have you been coming here for a long time?
Ever since they opened here.
Long-time manager Jeff Warland met his wife in the store. His mum worked here and he started at age 15 as a holiday job.
From that, I never gone back to school and I'm still here, 48 years later.
The family now wants to revamp the 6,000 square metre site with plans to include an Aldi store.
One of the things that I can do for the community here is to redevelop this site in such a way that it brings new retail vitalisation back to Toronto. So It's the end of one era and perhaps the beginning of another.
Paul Lobb, NBN News.
He describes it as a doozy of a decision made during a particularly challenging phase of his life. Harry Gordon is, of course, referring to the moment he decided to fake his own death in a boating accident on Port Stephens. He then assumed an alter ego to live in various countries, was busted and spent 12 months in jail, and he penned a book about the whole drama. But now the convicted con, who prefers to focus on family rather than fraud, wants to secure a part of his past that he looks upon quite fondly, his holiday home at North Arm Cove near Karua. The monstrous waterfront mansion will be auctioned on November 10 as part of the divorce settlement with his ex-wife.
I doubt if I would ever live there full time, but it would be nice to think that I could buy it and pass it on to my family.
With 630 square feet of floor space, 7 bedrooms, an unusual full granite laundry and private jetty, it's begging for someone with big bucks that's into boating.
This is very well hidden off the road, nobody passes through here, but obviously it's also set up for entertaining, so people who like large families, lots of guests.
The home is expected to break sales records for the area, but the human-sized fiberglass toad in the lounge room is not part of the deal.
Some of my friends and family were aware that I could be a little cavalier in a boat and had perhaps some of the tendencies of toad in Wind in the Willows, so they commissioned some artists to make a toad as a reminder to me to be a little more careful at sea.
Probably a good thing Harry will be taking Toad with him. Jessica Phyllis, NBN News.
Jets marquee Mario Jardel will be taking things easy this week. After injuring his back at training, he'll miss the trip to Melbourne.
It's probably a setback which he didn't need because he was working very, very hard on the paddock, and especially with his fitness, which is, as we've said from day one, has been work in progress.
The Jets leave for Melbourne tomorrow. Both teams locked in 14 points.
The boys always rise to the occasion, and it's a great atmosphere. I've got family down there as well, so it's another big point.
It's no wonder Melbourne produces a big game feel. The latest figures show its crowd count after 4 home matches tops the league so far. Newcastle is third.
That's a remarkable achievement considering we are not a capital city.
We wonder what impact John Aloisi will have on Central Coast crowds, with the former Socceroos star attending his first training session with the Mariners today, having not played for 3 months.
It was good to meet the boys and to get out there finally and start training and get to know what the players are like and how the coaches work. So it's exciting, and I'm looking forward to the game now.
He has to be selected first, but when it's reportedly costing the club $500,000 for 3.5 months, it'd want to get its money's worth. Adam McIlwright, NBN News. Mark Bint represents a changing of the guard within Hunter Surf Lifesaving as it rebuilds its interbranch squad.
The branch has finished around about the 4th, 5th mark in the last few years. We're wanting to push into the top 3, and ultimately we want to go number 1.
And it's people like Bint from Swansea Belmont the branch will be looking to at next month's New South Wales Interbranch Championships at Yamina Beach.
In the water, you have to go for a multi-skilled athlete who basically is the iron person in your club or in the branch.
He is one of 2 senior Ironmen in the mix, with Swansea Belmont making up 3/4 of the open water sports team. World and national flags champion Lisa Wright will take her place on the beach, while in a landmark year, both men's and women's surfboat crews will compete at the same interbranch carnival for the first time.
We always thought they should have gone that way. The last couple of years they've alternated, where they've had a male one year then a female one year, but this is the first time that they'll have both crews at the same beach and the same venue.
Dixon Park crews will represent the Hunter. Adam McIlwright, NBN News.
This empty spot used to be taken up by a $600 model Lamborghini, but it wasn't bought from Newcastle business Frontline Hobbies. Thieves broke into the cabinet and stole it. It's one of hundreds of items that shoplifters take from Colin Scott's store every year, and as you can expect, he's sick of it. Like many retailers, he believes new legislation, which gives police the power to issue on-the-spot fines to people caught shoplifting, will not deter criminals.
These new laws really demean the offence of shoplifting. It brings it down to the level of a parking fine. Now, how silly is that?
Retailers allow about 2% of their profit margin to cover shoplifting every year. It's a crime that costs the industry millions and millions of dollars. Mr. Scott thinks the only way to get through to the culprits is to treat them as what they are, criminals.
We will tie them up. We will hold them until the police come. And we will always tell the police we want to prosecute. And that's the only way we're going to stop this.
From November 1, officers will issue $350 fines to anyone caught shoplifting goods worth $300 or less. Jessica Phyllis, NBN News.
Each year, hundreds of domestic violence victims come to Carries On High for potentially life-saving advice.
We do a lot of programs to help women to plan their exit or to keep themselves safe in the relationship.
Despite the Lower Hunter having the highest rate of domestic violence in the state, this is the only outreach centre attached to a refuge in the region. But now the operation's future is in jeopardy, with the state government refusing to grant the $65,000 needed to keep the service open. Since September, Carries On High has been forced to use community donations to fund its running costs.
We really need to hear that this service will have ongoing funding so we can concentrate on what we're supposed to do, working with the women and working with the children.
Madeline Bond, NBN News. Each year, hundreds of domestic violence victims come to Carries On High for potentially life-saving advice.
We do a lot of programs to help women to plan their exit or to keep themselves safe in the relationship.
Despite the Lower Hunter having the highest rate of domestic violence in the state, this is the only outreach centre attached to a refuge in the region. But now the operation's future is in jeopardy, with the state government refusing to grant the $65,000 needed to keep the service open. Since September, Carries On High has been forced to use community donations to fund its running costs.
We really need to hear that this service will have ongoing funding so we can concentrate on what we're supposed to do, working with the women and working with the children.
Madeline Bond, NBN News.
Labor's campaign launch began as a bit of a schmozzle, with the guest of honour, Paul Keating, running late and then arriving at the wrong door, prompting Mr Combay and his team to run around the outside of the Wallsend Bowling Club to meet him. But once the pair made it inside, there was a hero's welcome from the party faithful. Mr Keating praised the electorate as a Labor heartland, and Mr Combay revealed his policies, which included a new railway station and road overpass for Glendale, a new hospital for Morisset and more GPs for Western Lake Macquarie. And he's ready to take on dumped MP Kelly Hoare if she runs as an independent.
It's a democracy, and so I don't have any concerns if that's the way that she wants to go, and I'll meet whatever candidates are up against me, but we'll know on November the 1st who those candidates are.
Paul Lobb, NBN News.
Nine-year-old Abby and 5-year-old Bailey both have juvenile arthritis.
It affects his joints, basically, his major joints, wrists, knees, elbows, neck, ankle.
Activities like these help to relieve the chronic condition, but the hospital's space for physiotherapy and occupational therapy is designed for adults, not children. The Woolworths appeal money will change all that.
To make it a really child-friendly, child-focused area that's going to get the best out of the children that come here.
Over the next few months, the area will be refurbished to the tune of $180,000, the amount raised across 28 stores in just 2 months. Woolworths staff run the appeal, but they say the community makes it happen.
They're the ones that give these kids a fresh future.
Children will not do what you need them to do unless they're happy in that space, and we can make an environment which is exciting and stimulating.
As they say, watch this space.
Joyce McCarter would have been 84 on Tuesday. A tireless community worker, she was best known for volunteering at Surf Fest over 2 decades and offering a kind word to the competitors.
If they lose, I say, oh, well, you're as good a surfer as me, but you'll get better.
One of her favourites was former world champ Mark Ocalupo.
I've known him since he was about 10 and a half. And Lou Keegan since he was born. Yeah, they're like my family, really, and the girls. Yeah, I love them very dearly. I'm very fond of them. And they all come to see if I'm all right.
Joyce died on Tuesday night after a short illness and will be sorely missed among the surfing community.
She's from the Wilson family of Mo Wilson, who used to run Newcastle Rugby League, and as I said, one of that a lot of the community work. She not only for surfing but for the sport in general, and for Newcastle, she was a true Novocastrian.
Joyce leaves behind 6 children, 14 grandchildren, 14 great-grandchildren and 4 great-great-grandchildren. Paul Lobb, NBN News.
The spread of avian influenza, especially through Asia, has been devastating, but the possibility of a mutated virus causing a pandemic is truly frightening. There could be tens of thousands of deaths in Australia alone.
A severe pandemic will have massive impacts on our health system and also have impacts on our economy.
Today, health experts addressed the media in Newcastle to discuss an influenza pandemic. Some analysts say an outbreak is imminent, that history tells us we're due.
It's for others to speculate when, but I think the issue is it's such an important event, we need to be prepared for it.
So are we prepared? Already our governments at all levels have invested much time and effort in devising strategies to deal with the pandemic.
I think Australia's travelling very well in terms of preparedness. There's always more to be done.
And government agencies will continue researching and, in a sense, crystal ball gazing, awaiting the apparently inevitable.
Harry Gordon says he was under intense pressure because of some dodgy business dealings when he did the unthinkable and decided to fake his death. He staged a crash in his speedboat and disappeared to Sydney, then overseas.
I should have left a note, run off with a floozy, gone fishing. I could have done anything. What a goose to pretend to be dead.
According to Harry, he paid $25,000 to borrow the identity of a man he met in Sydney, and from there, things just got out of hand.
There's a phrase from a better man than me, oh, what a tangled web we weave when first we practice to deceive. It's so true.
And although adopting a new life in South Africa, England, Spain and New Zealand sounds like a thriller minute, Harry says it was all quite mundane.
I wasn't Harrison Ford. This wasn't an adventure story. I lived a life of quiet industry. I got a job and then got a business, employed people, and just lived in a normal house.
Now the multi-millionaire may have a different version of normal to most of us, what with the absolute waterfront holiday home and everything, but convicted con aside, he's still just a man who feels like most.
Until I had a grandchild, I didn't realise that that was probably the defining thing in my life. Businessman, what does that matter? I'm a grandfather, and I'm a darn good grandfather.
Harry Gordon continues to be a successful businessman, more so than many. Soon he'll marry a woman he met in New Zealand and continue on what he says, besides that one blip, is a pretty conventional existence.
I am exactly what I appear to be, a boring, balding, middle-aged businessman, and I will just fade into obscurity.
Jessica Phyllis, NBN News.
It's been another busy season for Craig Anderson, but it all wraps up at the Oceania Motocross Championships in Geelong. The national champion isn't expecting to compete again until February, but he's left plenty in the tank for his rivals from across the Tasman.
It's all going good. I feel good. The bike is good, and tested the new 08 450 last week in Melbourne, and it was pretty good. It was a little different, so it's looking forward to riding it.
Anderson's last hit-out was on home soil at Cameron Park, but this weekend will be a different prospect, with the Kiwis calling on some big guns, including the world number 3.
Josh Coppins has come back from Europe to ride for New Zealand, so they've got a pretty hot team.
Meanwhile, Anderson says details of the new look National Supercross series are close to being finalised. The brainchild of Anderson's cousin Chad Reed is expected to feature 6 rounds, including an event in the Hunter.
It's still pretty well done, I believe. They're just sort of finalising a few little things now, and I think the first round may be going to be in Perth or something like that. So it's going to be an awesome series.
Mitchell Hughes, NBN News. It may look like child's play, but this scaled-down version of Formula One racing is big business. The eventual winner of the international competition will earn a huge leg up into a world of even faster cars.
It's a big competition, big prizes, $1.5 million scholarship to London City University at the end of the day, so these guys are serious.
The technology and techniques used here mirror those of the professional ranks. Hundreds of work hours for just a second on track, but it's not just about speed.
They're judged on their folio, their design, their engineering, verbal presentations, marketing, so it's a whole sort of business approach.
Australia has a proud history in the event. A group of Year 7 students from Melbourne claimed the 2005 world title. Team Impulse from Sydney is favourite to take out this year's state crown. If successful, they'll go on to the Nationals in Noosa for a shot at the world title at the Malaysian GP next year.
In our first year we came 4th of the national finals, coming up to last year where we came 2nd overall by just half a mark out of 300. So we're getting better, so hopefully this year we can get to Nationals, take it out and represent Australia at the Internationals.
The state title continues at Newcastle University tomorrow. Mitchell Hughes, NBN News.
The Hunter is still a hive of building activity thanks to the June storms and floods, but the Hunter Valley Research Foundation uses new home approval statistics as an indicator of economic growth rather than repairs and renovations. So with new home approvals down 27% on last year, there's now a gloomy future awaiting the building sector.
It's a leading indicator of the construction for the construction industry, and would suggest that the demand for new housing is going to start to peter out over the next couple of quarters.
And the longer-term future doesn't look good, with the survey showing there's low expectations for people to build a new home. Excess demand for housing and rising rental prices usually means that residential construction should be ripe for a takeoff. But the supply is not increasing, possibly due to interest rate rises, and there's certainly more of those to come. The good news is that consumer and business confidence is high, with more new car sales and business experiencing a rise in trade, while our labour market is also strong.
We are at record low levels of unemployment, and it's very rare times that we actually have a lower unemployment rate than the state average, and in fact we've had a lower rate now for 3 consecutive months.
Jane Goldsmith, NBN News.
It's good, clean fun that could soon be significantly restricted in Newcastle. As this preliminary draft management plan shows, bike riding throughout the southern half of Glenrock State Recreation Area could be banned by the National Parks and Wildlife Service for conservation reasons.
I see it as unfair to exclude one group from that area, and that's what this proposal does.
The proposed ban would block access to the area's more challenging trails.
If they restrict the access to Glenrock, it's going to kill the sport in the Hunter area, and on top of that, for the industry, local bike shops, selling mountain bikes is going to be pretty hard if there's nowhere to ride bikes.
But National Parks and Wildlife says the plan isn't final and is still open for public comment. Madeline Bond, NBN News.
Coal mining is one of Australia's most dangerous occupations. Last year, of the more than 16,000 people the coal industry employs nationally, 2,223 made workers' compensation claims. On average, $6 million worth of claims is paid out each month. To help alleviate the demand from injured coal industry workers on healthcare facilities, a new $7 million injury management centre has opened at Spears Point.
Basically, we want to make sure that in the coal mining industry and mining generally that we have zero fatalities.
The facility helps with all facets of rehabilitation for miners who've suffered a workplace injury.
From lodgement of claim, we'll also be doing physiotherapy, pain management and general health services.
The centre is among 8 to be opened statewide by mid-next year, including one at Singleton.
Well, this is part of a major plan involving the expenditure of over $60 million in occupational health and safety.
Christy Carter, NBN News.
The War Memorial Cultural Centre in Lehman Street has been the hub of culture in the city for half a century. When it opened 50 years ago today, Herald photographer Ron Morrison snapped this photo of the huge crowd patiently waiting to get in, but there was a hitch.
Someone lost the key or couldn't find the key at that point of time, and they had to race out the back and get a duplicate or something to let the crowd in.
The crowd was a little smaller today, but nevertheless marked the occasion. Carmel Lutton was also at the opening. She was a music student with the Con when lessons moved from army huts in Civic Park to the new cultural centre.
Almost from the slums to Buckingham Palace type change in our life. We had rooms that were much bigger. We had a little concert hall.
Lyndon Dadswell's sculpture still stands proudly in the foyer, and the library inside is now one of the busiest in the state. Paul Lobb, NBN News.
It looks like the Reserve Bank will have to raise interest rates a couple of times over the next few months. NAB's view is that we'll get one the day after the Melbourne Cup and before the next election, and equally a following one probably in December or early next year. Could well end up into the mid-90s over the next 6 months and even get to one if the good news kept on coming.
It's one of Australia's oldest operating power stations, but Liddell near Muswellbrook is at the forefront of technology, particularly when it comes to initiatives to protect the environment.
We generated more last year than we have in the previous 27 years, which is excellent for the station, and we're increasing the efficiency and improving the greenhouse gas reduction out of this power station by using new technology.
After a recent turbine upgrade, Liddell's carbon dioxide output has been reduced by 700,000 tonnes a year and its coal consumption slashed by 400,000 tonnes per annum. It's also been the testing ground for the production of solar energy at a coal-fired power station. In a world first, these curved linear Fresnel reflectors rotate to catch the sun's rays and focus them on this steam pipe in the air above, heating the water inside up to 285 degrees centigrade. That steam that's created is then transferred back into the power station, replacing steam currently taken from the turbine.
And effectively means we're generating electricity using heat from the sun rather than heat from coal.
With the technology proven successful, Macquarie Generation has committed to building a $5.5 million solar energy plant. It would produce enough electricity to power 500 homes. Macquarie Generation says other energy providers have been slow to adopt the concept because solar energy is more expensive to produce.
It's a technology that needs to be developed, and our business decided that we would be part of the development of that technology.
Christy Carter, NBN News.
I think we're at the cusp now of heading on the road to recovery, and that will be indicated by the fact that we're now starting to plan racing.
Bulk carriers have long had to share the port with their smaller cousins, and these outriggers are the latest members of the harbour family. Six-person crews are a common sight in Shoal Bay, but the pool of paddlers in Newcastle saw the Port Stephens Club start a city branch.
We've never been able to sort of train much here in a six-person outrigger, but recently they had a spare one and they were happy to station it down here so to help build the membership as a extension of the Port Stephens Club.
Indicative of the sport's popularity, Newcastle will for the first time host a round of the Open Water Series next month for one- and two-person outriggers before the state titles. If conditions are anything like they were earlier today, the branch would be well placed to host bigger events.
So nice swell. The Hawaiians love swell. Tahitians all go in the swell, and that's what we learn to play with. So that's the name of the game. Flat water's boring after a while.
Crews in this year's Gosford to Lord Howe Island yacht race could probably do with a few paddles if there are any chance of breaking the 34-hour race record with light wind forecast for tomorrow's start. Jim Holly's back again at the helm of Aurora from the Newcastle Cruising Yacht Club. Belmont, based in a circle, will race in the Performance Handicap division for the 414 nautical mile Blue Water Sprint. The race starts in Broken Bay at 1 o'clock.
As the tornado unleashed its destructive force, a family was mesmerised by the dramatic scene unfolding before their eyes, recording it all on their video camera. With huge hailstones pelting down and the foreboding dark clouds, it was a terrifying scene, but Anna Maria Hull from Modenville and her children watched the tornado grow in ferocity, sucking up and spitting out everything in its path.
Something's got destroyed. Now you know what they like. They pick things up and smash things. I hope it doesn't come here, darling.
Thankfully it didn't, but the Dunoon township wasn't so lucky, with residents waking to utter devastation. The local public school was decimated, this classroom torn apart, the school now closed until further notice.
We saw the storm coming and we made sure we got the children home as soon as we could, so they were very, very lucky.
And while the roof of this church is still intact, the tornado went in through one side and out the other, almost as if a bulldozer had driven through, demolishing everything in its path.
It was just phenomenal. It went straight through the wall of the church. You watched it all happen. It was just amazing.
As for homes, roofs were peeled off, trees uprooted, yards destroyed and debris strewn across the village. Parts of homes were blown hundreds of metres away.
The roof collapsed through this morning onto the car. My whole house is flooded.
There's clearly a couple of houses here which have lost their entire roofs and will probably be a write-off.
Storm chaser Jimmy Degura caught this dramatic footage of an electricity substation erupting in a shower of sparks when it was struck by flying debris. He's witnessed 38 tornadoes in the US and says nothing compares to this.
Well, this is the most spectacular footage I've ever taken in terms of a tornado so close.
Power and phone lines are still being restored to some homes. The clean-up from the wild storms will continue for many days to come.
I've never seen anything so vicious as what this is. The damage is just way over the top, and I just hope we don't get any more of them.
Jane Goldsmith, NBN News. On the night of June 8, the rising water took just minutes to change lives forever. While the water receded fast, for many that frightening night has left behind emotional and mental scars.
Oh, it's a bit of a strain on the family. We've got 3 children and, it takes its toll.
We lost everything, the whole house.
With their son wheelchair-bound, the Shawprisk family slept in their attic to escape the water. Today they joined with their neighbours from the close-knit Hamilton North community in a celebration of togetherness.
Just remembering that the community spirit, we had neighbours from down the street coming and checking on us.
While some families have returned to their homes, many are still displaced, living in temporary accommodation.
For the first 8 weeks we actually moved 7 times with washing baskets. We've got permanent accommodation now. They've just started plastering. Hopefully January we'll be back home. It's just a very slow process.
Christy Carter, NBN News. Nearly 500 people living with a disability call the Stockton Centre home. Today they joined with the community for their 50th annual fete to raise money for the centre.
Without this facility, there are so many people in our community who would have no options at all.
Last year's fete raised $25,000 funding this Liberty Swing. Proceeds from today will be used to heat the facility's swimming pool. Over the past 2 decades, the design of disability services has moved away from communal group homes like Stockton to supported community living. That has made the future of this facility uncertain. Over the past year, the state government has been considering options, including closing the centre in 2010 and replacing it with an aged care facility for people with a disability, similar to one planned for Sydney.
That's about filling a gap that doesn't exist in the service system, having retirement-style accommodation for people with a disability.
Christy Carter, NBN News.
Even before a ball was touched, the Jets really were kicked in the guts. Stuart Michalik was struck down with a stomach bug just before kick-off, and only then did coach Gary Van Egmond realise his gun midfielder wasn't going to start. After some last-minute paperwork, referee Matthew Breeze allowed Noel Spencer to take his place. When the match eventually started, Jade North's foot kept the hosts out of trouble in defence, while Newcastle has the head of Adam Griffiths to thank for this. There was some conjecture about contact within the box. Down the other end, the rough and tumble continued. The Jets' only import on the park showed promise, while Melbourne's best chance wasn't realised despite 2 touches from Archie Thompson. Things deteriorated for the Victory when defender Steve Pantelides lashed out at Joel Griffiths. It didn't take long for the striker to exact revenge, exploiting the 10-man Victory side. It was the Victory's first loss at home this season, and Melbourne is still yet to beat the Jets under Gary Van Egmont's stewardship.
Newcastle Airport Chief Executive Paul Hughes was finally able to put his cap on the airport's newest promotional mascot after today's confirmation by Tiger Airways that it will add the region to its timetable.
They're commencing on the 18th of January of 2008 with 2 return flights daily from Melbourne.
In Melbourne, Tiger's CEO Tony Davis revealed the ticket price that the company believes will give their campaign bite in the hunt for passengers.
Are all available for less than $10, $9.95 each way on those services, including all the taxes and charges.
The Newcastle-Melbourne route is already serviced by Virgin Blue, Jetstar and QantasLink, and the addition of Tiger is expected to see air travellers emerge as the big winner from this dogfight.
Certainly it creates strong competition, with we're going up to 9 services per day to Melbourne now.
The addition of the 7th airline to operate through Newcastle comes with airport management forecasting passenger numbers for this year at 970,000, helped by patronage on Norfolk Island flights.
Norfolk is doing particularly well. They have very strong seat occupancy at the moment on their flights out of and into Newcastle.
Gary Blair, NBN News.
While marine traffic had the green light, it's still very slow going for vehicles travelling across the Swansea Bridge. Today, technicians worked to fix the ageing structure after human error saw it become stuck open yesterday. That left motorists stranded on either side of the channel for hours until they were finally diverted across via the southbound lane. The incident was today labelled a disgrace by Swansea MP Robert Coombs.
Very unhappy. It's unacceptable as well. I've met with the General Manager of the RTA this morning. We've had a look at both the maintenance programs and also response when a problem occurs.
The northbound lane of the bridge is expected to remain closed until tomorrow morning. Robert Coombs says the incident is further cause in the town's push for a new bridge.
I've written to Minister Roosendale this morning asking that a budgeted $200,000 be made available to the RTA so that we can commence immediately with a public consultation program.
Christy Carter, NBN News.
We found the house well alight, a hot fire burning at the rear of the house.
We're quite keen to extract the lessons to be learnt from the whole incident, make sure that we implement the reforms.
New figures released today by Mission Australia show that on any night there are more than 100,000 people living on the streets. Nearly half are aged under 25, with 25,000 between 12 and 18. And the number of hunter kids in that situation may surprise you.
There are about 3,000 homeless people, we understand, in the Hunter region, and of those, about half of them are under 25. That's usually a surprise for the community. We normally think of a homeless person as being someone middle-aged and male, but it's actually not the reality.
The report lists housing affordability as a major contributor to homelessness in the Hunter. Mission Australia says there's not enough assistance available. It's calling for federal funding for more integrated programs for those doing it tough.
We do need more places to support homeless people, but we also need the other supports that they need. So help with their mental health, perhaps their drug and alcohol, and also help, particularly for young people, to stay connected to school and education.
Christy Carter, NBN News.
When they began service in September 1961, the 620 class diesel passenger cars were the pride of the New South Wales Government's railway workshops. Unfortunately, by the time the Rattlers carried their last paying passengers in June this year, they'd become a sad statement about the condition of passenger rail in the Hunter. But today, after 46 years of service, the workhorse had its trip into retirement.
It's appropriate to give them a really happy send-off to say thank you for the trains, but much more importantly to the men and women that have worked on them.
Former drivers, guards and maintenance workers given the honour of a return trip between Newcastle and Paterson to farewell the Rattlers. But while they may no longer be a regular fixture on the Hunter line, some of the fleet will be kept for posterity.
So 4 of these 620 class cars will be preserved, will become part of the operating core heritage assets of this state.
Gary Blair, NBN News.
Annette Gillies has been scrapbooking snippets of the Silverchair story since the early days, from fresh-faced teenagers rehearsing in a suburban garage to headlining Australia's biggest music awards event.
We had no idea this would happen. We were just doing normal parenting things, whether they be athletes or whether they be academically based. They just happened to like the guitar and the drums.
While there were some testing times with neighbours in the garage days, the families were always supportive, helping the boys find gigs and carting around all the gear. Even now, Annette still runs the fan club.
Oh, they wouldn't be where they are today if it wasn't for the mothers. And I mean that quite seriously.
At least they know it. The families were at the awards last night to witness the 5 gong feat, but even after all the success, Annette Gillies says to her, they're still just the boys.
This is who I see up there.
The ARIA's honour reward for the larger Silverchair family.
It's not the hard work of going out and digging holes 8 hours a day, but it is hard work. But they get a lot of reward, and this was the pinnacle.
In his first game as caretaker 12 months ago, Gary Van Egmond presided over a breakthrough win for the Jets, and he's been coach at Newcastle ever since. John Kosmina did something similar at Sydney FC over the weekend, and his Newcastle counterpart knows just how restrictive the new role can be.
You can't really do a great deal, you can't buy and sell. You've sort of got, realistically, someone else's team.
As for Van Egmond's team, seasoned defender Matt Thompson will sit out the Sydney match after receiving another yellow card in the Jets' 2-0 win over Melbourne, his 150th A-League game.
Yeah, Tomo was obviously disappointed. It's the first time he said he's been suspended, and it's the first time he's missed a game. But he's, just wants to ensure that we try and get the 3 points this week.
There could also be a spot in the midfield with Stu Michalek undergoing further tests today. It was thought a gastro bug forced him out of Friday night's match. Appendicitis hasn't been ruled out either.
Maybe he's picked up a bug from overseas, we're not too sure. But again, we'll hopefully get to, excuse the pun, the bottom of it.
From the time William Salisbury was 5, most of his life has been spent on a pair of skates. He is a state and national champion, but wasn't always so smooth.
William was immediately noticed some talent there. He just moved like a skater does, but he was pretty wild.
I could not skate at all. I used to fall over and fall over. I used to get so frustrated, and I used to just get also nervous when I used to go on the floor, and I just gradually got better and better at it.
The Newcastle High student still stumbles, but just as quickly picks himself up, and he's been doing that his whole life. Born 16 weeks premature, William was a regular in neonatal intensive care and on portable oxygen for 12 months.
It was touch and go whether he would sort of pull through or not, but he was 5 months old then, and so they sort of said, well, take him home and see what happens.
What happened was that William pulled through and the skates really gave him a lift. He still has asthma and chronic lung disease, something he'll contend with at the World Artistic Roller Skating Championships.
You just got to be so confident in yourself, and you just got to have faith and just believe in yourself, and if you do that, you'll be fine.
Training's been a struggle too. His local club folded, meaning regular trips to Sydney, supported by family and friends and Father Riley's Youth Off the Streets program. So this will be his last inline skating campaign before a switch to the ice, pushing for sport's ultimate prize, an Olympic medal. Where do you see William this time in 10 years?
I've already wished him luck and told him I hope to see him on my TV screen at the Olympic Games.
These men aren't going anywhere until they're paid out, and they've got the support of the community.
And basically we're going to stay here whenever we can, take it in shifts so we can stay out the front and basically fight for what's rightfully ours.
On Friday, the 18 Barnsley joinery workers were made redundant. The company maintains it was forced to downsize after suffering extensive damage in the June long weekend storms.
2 weeks ago they were saying it's all good and, $3 million worth of work in the books, and, come to work on the Friday and you get your redundancy letter, and I was told I got 20 minutes to get out.
But rather than giving workers their redundancy packet in one immediate and bulk payment, the company is paying them out in increments over the next 8 weeks.
I'm supposed to get a $400 pay this week. I'm supposed to make that last me a fortnight, 2 mortgage payments.
They've gone behind our backs to try and make it easier for them and haven't thought about anyone that they've got rid of.
I just want my money, what the hours, I'll be gone.
The company says it has no choice but to meter out their pay due to cash flow problems.
We've struggled for months now to try and get back on our feet. The business has been in operation for about 50 years and we just simply haven't recovered from that.
But employees intend to fight the payment plan.
With our union representative, we're going to fight this through the courts and get our pay and entitlements.
Madeline Bond, NBN News.
The June long weekend deluge may have been a once-in-30-year weather event, but it certainly highlighted that under extreme circumstances, parts of Newcastle are vulnerable to flood. Communities along Throsby Creek have chronicled their experience with the inundation, compiling a report that they believe identifies the contributing factors.
We've ended up with a 60-page report and 30 recommendations, which we've now presented to the Council, Hunter Water, Catchment Authority and other authorities.
Included in the action plan is the removal of silt deposits from the creek at Tyers Hill and silt dredging downstream from Linwood.
Throsby Creek doesn't have the same capacity because it now has so much silt in it that it didn't have before. But that's the expensive one, but there are a lot of very inexpensive options as well, and we've highlighted those.
Even though much of the other work, like improvements to street gutters and drainage, fall to Newcastle Council and Hunter Water, the forum accepts residents and developers must also act. It includes encouraging homeowners to consider raising their homes and that new developments use raised floor heights where flooding or drain overflows occurred in June. Gary Blair, NBN News.
Watching the world's fastest riders on TV may not be just firing the imaginations of young men, it may be spurring them into action.
The accident rate has been climbing amongst young men with motorcycles. It's always been a problem from time immemorial. We have it with the young P-plate car drivers and same with motorcyclists. People sadly want to live out their fantasies on the public street.
In Newcastle alone, 4,500 people a year are put through this rider training course before they can apply for a rider's licence. But there's no licence needed to ride on private land, and the number of crashes resulting in hospital treatment from bush and road accidents combined has doubled in the last 5 years. Motor scooters are cheap to buy, and with the price of petrol these days, they're also cheap to run. They're being sold in record numbers. There's even a new 3-wheeled model, which gives more grip and even stands upright at the traffic lights. But experts say all motorcycles need to be used with care.
You've got to be very aware of the other traffic users, road users. You've got to actually it would make you a better car driver because you're more aware. You pay more attention to what's going on the road.
Paul Lobb, NBN News.
There's no doubt about it, with this sort of talent, 22-year-old Morgan Evans is on his way to the top. In the past 12 months, he's won the Music Oz Awards, Telstra Road to Tamworth competition and recorded his first single, Big Skies, which was released in September. And for the country artist, the next few months look to be just as hectic.
Shannon Knowles asked me to come on the road with him for a bit, which is going to be a whole lot of fun. We get to come back here to Newcastle and play the Civic Theatre, which is one of those things everyone wants to do if they come from Newcastle.
But it's not till early next year that his abilities will really be put to the test, when he performs alongside the band responsible for Boot Scoot and Boogie, Brooks and Dunn in Sydney and Melbourne.
Yeah, well, it's one of those nerve-wracking things. You're coming on before the biggest duo ever in musical history, and I guess it's going to make me step up a bit, which is good.
And it won't end there, with the Novocastrian planning to write and release a string of new songs.
The next year is kind of going to be all about getting songs together, getting out on the road, playing a bunch of shows, and then getting the album happening.
It's pre-race routine that Justin Norris is once again familiarising himself with as he makes his comeback to competition. He took a break at the end of 2005. Now he's pretty much racing every weekend, with the Sydney leg of the World Cup next.
It's just really good to practice those race skills, and because you're racing at high quality, then that's what you've got to do at the end of the day, is swim fast.
The 200 and 400 individual medley and 200 butterfly are Norris's choice events, with 2 Olympic spots offered in each. A medalist in Sydney, disappointment followed in Athens, and after that he took time to build a family and a business teaching children how to swim. 3-year-old daughter Sabre, his star pupil.
So I've been implementing some of those ideas into my own training, so I've come a bit full circle that way as well. So it's been really, really good having those coaches' eyes and then being able to apply it as a swimmer again as well. And
the 27-year-old says this third Olympics campaign will be his last. Perhaps, though, not for the Norris family. Adam McKilrick, NBN News. It's a change of pace, if you like, for the Newcastle Harness Racing Club.
When they hear that whoop crack, you've got to hang on tight.
Not since the 23rd of August has the Paceway seen so much action, and next Tuesday 6 camels will take the place of trotters at the club's Melbourne Cup meeting.
Yeah, Ruby's our best camel just here. Yeah, she's our favourite for the day.
Much like today's demonstration, it's been a rough ride for the club due to the ban on horse movements and the subsequent cancellation of harness races.
A novelty like having the camels here will get people onto the course. First time we've had it busy, for 3 months. We need the income.
Adam McKilrick, NBN News.
Among the commuters getting off the train from Sydney today was one of the leading minds in the development of alternative power sources for vehicles. Dr. Raja Shikara holds 19 patents on propulsion systems for cars, but says we can't realistically reduce greenhouse emissions from cars until the technology becomes more efficient and more affordable. At around $50,000, a hybrid like the Toyota Prius is beyond most family budgets.
The efficiency of the hybrid vehicles are poor now, but in future, it will be mostly hybrid vehicles with higher efficiency. Instead of getting, say if you are getting 15 kilometers per litre now, in future it could be 50 kilometers per litre.
He says petrol engines will be the norm for the next 20 years until battery technology for electric vehicles becomes cheaper and hydrogen cells can be safely used. But some, like Stephen Morris, who lives with MS, are already relying on electric power to get around.
It means I've got my independence as such. I can still get around, I can go and do shopping, I can do whatever I have to do and not have to rely on catching cabs or relying on other people to take me anywhere,
Paul Lobb, NBN News.